Yeah, thank you guys very much for having me. I am a emergency medicine resident physician up at UAB. Currently in my second year of training. Really glad to be here. I think it's a very important topic and a very timely one kind of in our society. And I was invited to talk about kind of stress and trauma and kind of how it relates to EMS personnel and first responders in general. Little background information on me. Before medical school, I was a firefighter and paramedic. I went through the UAB's EMS training program right before, it was one of the last ones they had. And then right after that, I went on to rookie school, became a firefighter. And then right after that, did like my critical care transport, all that kind of stuff. So worked up in the community, like about an hour north of here for a few years as a firefighter and paramedic. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed like the medical aspect of what I was doing a lot. And that's kind of what ultimately made me want to pursue a career in medicine. So went on to become a doctor. And it was kind of logical kind of progression to go into emergency medicine after kind of what I had been doing beforehand. I think I have a pretty good perspective as to what, we deal with pre-hospital and then also in the hospital, up at UAB. Obviously, it's a very large catchment area. I see a lot of really sick folks, both just medical-wise and then trauma. But I will say just kind of from personal experience that, it's my opinion at least that being actually physically on a scene of an accident or in someone's house, for example, like in a child's house when something really bad is going on, looking up on the wall, seeing pictures, family members standing over you. I mean, it's a very stressful environment. And I think it makes things a lot more personal when you're actually there on the scene. We see a lot of sick people up at UAB. But it's a little different because they come in like nicely packaged and they're like, here's your patient all nicely packaged and stuff. But when you're actually there on the scene, it's hard. It takes a toll on you emotionally. I won't tell like a bunch of war stories or anything. I'm sure there's a lot of good ones in here. But I will say like I remember vividly my first like real bad trauma that I ran as a firefighter. It's just kind of one of those things that just is ingrained in your mind. I've seen a lot of bad traumas up at UAB, but nothing like really has stuck with me like that first real bad trauma. I'll just briefly tell you quickly about it. So I was, just had started working. It was a real late night shift. Get the call for a bad wreck. Pull up on scene. It's really dark. You see an overturned car over in a ditch. Kind of scan the area, and there's, just kind of. It's terrible, just like bodies kind of sprinkled everywhere. You get out there, the first person I got to was like, very evident this person is not going to survive. His injuries incompatible with life. So that process of like having to, just move from that really, really sick, critical patient that was probably or was going to die, walking away from them and going to another patient, that triage mode. That's also something really hard to deal with as a firefighter, EMS, first responder. So got to the other patients, really critically injured, able to stabilize them at least enough to get to UAB on that helicopter. Ended up surviving and, coming back after like a lot of rehab and talking to us and thanking us and something really rewarding. But, I just remember that incident it took a toll, it was one of those things. It was my first bad one, and it really stuck with me more so than like all that, I've seen a lot more gruesome stuff up at UAB, but that one was really the one that has really stuck with me more than anything. So I'd like to just briefly talk about some of the common stressors that first responders and like EMS personnel deal with. There's always that danger of personal injury, when you're on the scene. That's something that's always in the back of your mind as a first responder EMS personnel. And then also injury to like your partners, which, our partners, our crew, it's family to us, because they, basically you live with them. In many cases you see them as much as you see your own family. So whenever something happens to them, that's hard to deal with. You're constantly dealing with severe injuries or death, something that can over time take an emotional toll on you. social isolation is a real issue that we deal with as well, because, you could just imagine that these are not things that, you can go home after a long day and then sit at the dinner table and talk about. It's hard. You basically have to find peers to talk with it about. And then there's also that kind of sometimes reluctance to seek help because, traditionally there's like a little bit of a stigma. Like we got into this profession knowingly and on purpose. I mean, sometimes you feel like, I need to be able to deal with what I see. So sometimes there's that little bit of a reluctance to try to seek help, It's kind of a culture. I feel like it's a little bit changing here recently. I know it's kind of personal experience and stuff, talking there, but I feel like there's a little bit of a culture change that's, I think, from stuff like this and getting out awareness that's kind of changing a little bit, which is a good thing. Guilt is something like survivor guilt. So when you have other crew members that don't make it through a bad incident, or just when you have a really sick patient that you think, it's kind of a slippery slope when you start thinking like this, but, if I had studied a little bit more, if I'd known a little more, acted a little bit more quickly, that this patient would have survived. Like I said, it's a slippery slope when you start going down that road, but it's common to go down that road. Substance use disorder, substance abuse is something that no socioeconomic class is immune to. It affects everybody, so you have to be aware of that and looking for the signs of that, and it's something that EMS and first responders are particularly at risk for. Violence towards rescuers. There's a study in pre-hospital emergency care that said that over 2/3 of EMS personnel have experienced some type of violence, either verbal or physical violence in the past year. And I mean, that's pretty significant, and it's something that these guys deal with on a common, regular basis. We kind of touched on this, but some of the more like stressful type of calls that we go on, you ask any one of these folks and children, almost everyone is going to say that's the hardest one to deal with. Whenever you have a really sick kid, a bad trauma, doesn't matter if this is like a natural progression of their disease or if it's just a bad trauma, those are the ones that you lose. I mean, speaking from personal experience, those are the ones that you lose sleep over. So it's very stressful, caring for, like, depending on what community you work in, caring for like family members, friends. It happens, and so that's hard to deal with, obviously. Disaster victims, either man-made or natural disasters, is something, unfortunately, is real reality in our society right now. And then, like, severe burns, severe trauma, stuff like that. It's always, when you're exposed to stuff like that, it can take a toll. The common psychiatric disorders that we always have to be on the lookout for, as I'm sure most of you or all of you are aware, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is a very common one, characterized by, intrusive thoughts, nightmares, flashbacks, avoidance-type behaviors that remind you of the stressful event, hyperarousal, and then, like, sleep disturbances. And basically all this leads to, like, functional impairment, so it's hard to do your job or to function as in your family. And it's also common to see, like, depression, anxiety, other substance abuse in patients with PTSD. It's important to know, just like the term acute stress disorder, most of you probably know that, but it's basically just terminology. So it's PTSD is after a month, and acute stress disorder is like within a month. So things that are important to recognize and kind of address. Adjustment disorder or common psychiatric illness that you have to deal with. Basically, it's within 3 months of a particular stressor or triggering event, characterized by, like, significant behavioral or emotional symptoms. May have, like, depressed mood, anxiety, behavioral, like, conduct disturbances, or combination of these. And then, of course, like, substance use disorder is something that you have to be on the lookout for with EMS and kind of first responders, that they're particularly at risk for. There was an article recently in pre-hospital emergency care, like chronic work-related stress, critical incident stress, and then alcohol use all significantly increase your risk of substance abuse, of PTSD, basically. And then psychiatric disorders, including PTSD, they all increase your risk of suicide. Real quickly, I'm done here. I'm sorry. I have a lot to say. The interventions basically is basically what we're doing right now, just increasing awareness of the issues, encouraging providers to be open about your symptoms, talk to each other about it, recognize PTSD, and treat it. And the proven treatments for that are like cognitive-based therapy, or cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and medications like SSRIs, SNRIs, and the combination of the two. Like she said, promoting work-life balance, common stress-reducing techniques like eating right, all that kind of stuff, exercise, and then get them support and resources. There's a good article, a good website I found, the Code Green campaign. Some of you might be familiar with it, but it has a lot of good links and stuff to resources that we can get out to these folks. I did want to mention one last thing. I saw in the pre-hospital emergency care journal, critical incident stress management. It started back in the 80s. Critical incident stress debriefing is when EMS personnel discuss feelings with peers and mental health professionals. I saw an article that said, it's basically a literature review that said, basically questioning the efficacy of it, and saw several meta-analyses and randomized controlled trials. There wasn't a lot of great research, but the ones that it did have, it basically came to the conclusion that that critical incident stress debriefing does not significantly reduce your risk for developing PTSD, and interestingly can actually cause a paradoxical worsening. It's important to know that, and at least to be familiar with that, and then look at until we get some more good research on that issue, at least not make that mandatory for these folks. And it said the reasoning was that it interferes with natural coping mechanisms. Again, it's kind of interesting, but that was kind of a lot of stuff. But thank you for listening to me. That's kind of all I have.
But they wanted me to discuss rural first responders who live in Lowndes County and volunteers. Volunteers are a little different than some of what you heard today because there's really not a structured environment in which you can get them to do things. I mean, if they don't want to do it, they're going home. But who are these folks? Who are the volunteers? In my fire department, they're farmers, they're electricians, they're mechanics, whoever shows up in Little Lounsboro. These folks signed up to lower an ISO rating, which is your fire insurance rating, and they just want to help the community. We got postal employees. We got an 80-year-old man that goes with us, and he gets upset if you try to help him. I mean, we watch out after him, but it's people just wanting to help. But they don't have the training. Chief Swanson earlier was talking about the type of the training that a lot of the paid fire departments and EMS crews go through. Well, you don't have that in the rural setting. You get what you can get. In our department, there's 13 of us. 10 of us are certified. We went the full gamut, learned all about the firefighting. There's some of us that don't. They just show up, and we teach them what we can, when we can, as we go out. So, and very little in our education was on stress management. If you look at the volunteer fire department, there's not a lot of nutrition and exercise goes into them folks because we're kind of big boys. And if you don't, and I am one, but they're not. The paid guys, they have to run, they have to stay in shape. Volunteer boys will go home if you tell them we have to do that. So we don't have the luxury of doing that. But what kind of calls do you think that a volunteer fire department go on? Most people think it's just little house fires occasionally, and a lot of times it is. We have a lot of grass fires where grown men are sitting on the porch when we show up, and we go out and stomp it out and go back home. don't understand that, but we do have some house fires occasionally. We have car fires. A lot of them, people steal your car here in Montgomery. They'll take it to Lowndes County and burn it. Because when we show up, there's nobody there. Have a lot of that going on, and those are dangerous. The way cars are made today, that magnesium will burn you bad. So I've had guys grab stop signs, keep from falling in a ditch, and burn their hands real bad because they didn't have the gloves on. So we don't do things like the paid guys do sometimes. They show out and they know what they're doing. We get there, think we know what we're doing, and sometimes we get hurt. But we have a lot of vehicle accidents, a lot of them. Nothing's worse than a redneck on a four-wheeler on a Sunday afternoon jumping ditches. Bad things are going to happen, and they do. Quite regularly down on Alabama River. We have falls, we have snake bites, we have baby season. We show up at nearby everything. I am the only EMT north in North Lowndes County. We have one ambulance in our entire county. Not one ambulance company, but one truck. So if it's busy, my next ambulance is out of Selma or Montgomery, and it's going to be a while. And it's just normally me, because when I get there, my guys have got my gloves holding out for me to put on, because they don't do medical. Okay? We assist ambulances in picking up some big boys down there and putting them on a stretcher, or a lot of the homes are built way up off the ground for flooding. We help them down. And then we have storm damage. So we're called to everything. If something's going on, they're calling us. And we try to get out there to do it. But then there's these other calls that we get that, as I used to be a former police officer. I was an accident investigator with the city of Montgomery. I was also an evidence tech. So I had to see all the bad stuff. The guys that are with my fire department, these farmers and electricians, they had never seen that before. So we get called on things that disturb people. We got people that are dead at the scene. I've got a young man that went with us, the first deceased person he ever saw, not even in a funeral home. He was cutting two ladies out of a car that just got killed. First time he's ever seen them. But he paid attention to what he was doing and got the two ladies out. We've shown up where people are screaming in the house that, they got somebody in the house and they're not sure if they got out. So we have to go in there and try to find those folks. Got people show up at car wrecks and they're screaming to get out. We had a guy the other night that hit a tree and his knees was beside his ears. The motor was where the steering wheel was. And he's screaming, "Get me out of here." The guy that was cutting him out, my guys, most of them that are with me, they're what I call, they like to be manly men. Where is Grant gone? Grant Culliver? I went to high school with him, by the way. These are men. They're not going to go get their fingernails done. These are... He'd have had to turn in his man card if we were still in high school. I'm sorry. But, these are men, and they were trying to cut that door out, and that guy was hollering, and it was bothering them so bad that they couldn't focus on what they're doing. It doesn't matter how tough you are or how strong you are or how mad, things bother you. They bother you. To hear a child screaming in a car bothers you. But you have to focus on what you're doing. You show up and people are burned, where you're actually looking for people in a house and you realize you're standing right in the middle of one. That's happened. Show up and children are purple and not breathing. It bothers you. We've had 3 like that, and fortunately we got every one of them breathing. But that bothers you. Why have you the worst feeling in the world is to show up somewhere and you don't know what to do. That's why I encourage people about CPR. Sitting there watching somebody die, when CPR is so simple, so easy to learn, but it's not knowing. We had a drowning last year. Hispanic family was down on the river, and their loved one drowned. They knew he was drowned. They knew he was down there. we're looking for him, and his whole family is sitting down on the sandbar watching us drag for him. And I couldn't imagine what was going to happen when we found it. Very, very disturbing. We show up at accident scenes where we're having to recover a body, help the coroner get them up, and sometimes we're throwing pieces of body in a body bag. People didn't sign up for that as volunteers, but they go. The people that we know that have those problems, I usually get them handling the equipment, packing up the equipment to get back. And these are manly men. These are not, I mean, these are guys, these are old pulpwooders. These are steel workers. I mean, these are folks, and it bothers them. The problem with men is that we won't talk about our feelings. You can forget that. We just don't do that unless your wife makes you. So we don't discuss that. And then you got the smell. It's one thing to see these things on a PowerPoint. It's another thing to actually sit there and see that person trying to live where you smell that death. I never smoke cigars, but you smoke them when you go to a person that's either been in a house for a long time or burned. Try to keep that smell out of your nose. And that's pretty graphic, but that's what these volunteers do. Paid guys do it all the time. But they can go back and talk to people. Very few volunteers have that opportunity. Paid guys see it a lot more too. So near about everyone we go to is a new experience for us. So what do we do whenever we go and experience something like that? We go home, we take a shower, and we go to work, usually with 2 or 3 hours of sleep. That's what volunteers do. Now, I don't know why men don't talk to each other. I pay attention to my guys because the one that gets in his truck and just leaves right after a bad call is one I'm going to call and check on. The young man who saw the first deceased, I called his dad 3 nights in a row to make sure he was all right. I don't know what other volunteers do, but I can tell you this, if you've ever seen a volunteer agency, you've seen a volunteer agency. All of them are different. None of them are the same. None of EMS is the same. They're all different. They handle them different. I talked to several EMS agencies over the years, and most of them have a chaplain somewhere that they can go talk to, but you got to get a man wanting to go talk about his feelings, and that's hard. Now, I know with some of the paid services, they may come back and make you is the key word, debrief about what you just saw, what we did right, what we did wrong, and talk about stuff to where you kind of get a feeling of somebody's having some problems with that. You can make people do that. You can't do that in the volunteer world. They simply go home. There was a girl that was wanting to go through nursing school, and she went with us about 8 months ago. And she just wanted to see what it was like. And a Ford 250 had hit this Accord head on. 2 women were dead. That's the one that the guy was cutting them out. They had pulled the guy out of his truck, which was on fire, and I went, and when I cut his britches legs off, there was bones splintered everywhere, both legs. And she stayed with me, and we got him on that helicopter, got him out of there. She didn't go to nursing school. She dropped out. Wasn't for her. So, you know, the paid folks, they see bad stuff. Volunteer folks see bad stuff. And I don't know what the answer to is in the volunteer world, because you can't force them or encourage them to do things. You just lose them. But you just can't imagine what the volunteer EMS fire world sees. They see the same thing as the paid folks do. They just don't see as much. They're not as trained. I know with the police department, we were trained for stuff, and I saw some bad stuff. But this was the first time these people are actually seeing this, where you get out of the truck and the mother brings you the baby and hands her to. Baby's not breathing. And they're panicking. And usually it's, you know, you can do a few things, get them going, and everybody's fine. But these guys just didn't sign up for that. They signed up to go and help put out a fire if they need to occasionally. But we're called to everything. And, I have old ladies come by my house to check their blood pressure. So we're kind of the community that they expect. But I hope there's a time and a place where volunteers can be, looked out after a little bit, because you got so many programs for other people. You just don't have them for the people out there that are volunteering their time, because there's nothing in it for them. Nothing. Whether they save your house or not, it's just a pride thing to them. They did something for somebody. So we need to find a way to take better care of the volunteers out there that don't have that. So that's perspective from the volunteer. And I know there's some volunteer guys here, and I'm sure that most of them agree, and I'm sure that there's differences within their department what they do. But we're pretty much all the same in the rural part of the state. Volunteers in Montgomery and around Huntsville and Mobile, there's more of them. They're bigger, but rural Alabama, where there's just very few folks, you just don't have the luxuries that some of these places do. So they're kind of out there on their own, just trying to take care of you. So that's all I've got.
I'm Corporal Jess Thornton. I work with Alabama State Troopers. Okay, there we go. I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I've been a trooper now for 11 years. January will be 12. Pretty much the only type of law enforcement I've ever done. I graduated college in 2004, and I was in the Trooper Academy in January 2005. So been pretty much trucking along ever since, and this has been my first career and hopefully my only career. I always wanted to do it, so had the personality to do it, and I've been okay with it. So just a couple things I'll share with y'all, some personal experiences. When I come out of the academy in 05, our academy is about 6 months long. A lot of, paramilitary type, a lot of hollering, a lot of screaming at you, a lot of getting us up in the middle of the night, and it'll really make you wonder if you signed up for the right thing. But a lot of just stress, puts a lot of stress on you. Then after we graduate, after 6 months of being in the academy, we ride with another trooper for about 10 weeks. And then during that experience, they're basically doing OJT, on-the-job training for you. So you ride with that trooper, or he actually rides with you after a while, and he pretty much every day critiques you on stuff and gets you through that 10-week OJT type stuff before we cut you loose and you're by yourself. And when I say troopers ride alone, I'm not exaggerating. We ride alone. There is no help with us. You're by yourself, and you may be covering 2 and 3 counties at a time by yourself, and the closest backup we're going to have is going to be that local municipality or the sheriff's office. The odds of another trooper being down the road are slim to far in between. But we all work well together. If they hear us needing help, they're coming. And if we hear them needing help, we're going to go. But that's our backup. So that's instilled in us. But the first week I graduated the academy, 80-90% of law enforcement, these guys can tell you, is compared to what you see on TV, it can be boring at times. And then all of a sudden, bam, things change within a minute or two. So you get complacent. Well, I'm riding with my FTO, field training officer, that first week. It's like my 3rd day at the academy. And we get a call of a guy walking down the side of I-85. I was assigned to Macon County. We get a call of a guy walking down the side of the interstate with a knife. And he says, man, 90% of these calls are BS. We'll get there and there won't be nothing there. So we pull up, and there's a guy walking down the side of the interstate with a butcher knife in his hands. And he said, well, I guess there is something to this one. So we start trying to talk to the guy on the PA. He won't listen. He's crazy. We didn't know this. We don't know who we're dealing with. So we both finally get out of the car, try to approach him. He's not being compliant. He's being combative. So at that time, we didn't have tasers. So we tried to spray him, pepper spray. And he run across I-85 trying to get away from us. So it was 2 of us, so we gave chase. And we get into the woods, and at that time, I'm just following along. We get to this deer fence, and the guy can't get over it. So he turns to us with that knife. And my partner, the guy training me, says, if you come towards me with that knife, I'm going to shoot you. And the guy just looks all crazy. And he come towards us with a knife. And he shot him and dropped him like a box of rocks right there. And he turns to me and he says, go back to the car, call for help, call for an ambulance, call for supervisors, call for ABI, because ABI investigated any officer-involved shootings. So I run to the car, and fast as I could go, I didn't have time to think about anything. So I get the car, get it to where we went in the woods with the guy, and during that time I'm getting telling them everything when they needed to know. And finally, everybody starts getting there and gets on scene. And I remember the ABI investigators took us to the Opelika post, and they separated us. And they start talking to us. And I'm like, this is getting serious. And I remember telling me, the ABI agent working the case, this stuff don't happen every day, don't let it bother you. And since then, I haven't been in any kind of officer-involved shootings or witnessed one. I've been to several scenes where somebody was shot and killed by law enforcement. But that was like the third or fourth day I was out of the academy. The first fatality crash I went to, first few weeks I was working, was 2 kids got killed on a wreck on I-85. And at that time, I didn't wrap my brain around it because I was young. I was like 23 and didn't really know what I was looking at when I first got out of the car. And now that I got kids, when I see a child dead, it freaking bothers me because I know that they're innocent, obviously. And it bothered me back then, but not near as much as it does now that I got them. And you see how innocent kids are. And so that's probably one of the worst things we see in law enforcement, to me, is probably children being killed. But since that shooting, I've seen multiple officer-involved shootings, suicides, dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of traffic crashes involving people that have been killed, including from a baby all the way up to an elderly person, and then murder scenes. Any which way somebody can die, we've seen it. And it's so over the course of that time, when we're involved in a shooting, we have to go see a psychologist to be cleared to come back for duty. And that's really about the only thing that's going to land us mandatorily in that chair to have to get cleared to come back to work, is being involved in something like that. Other than that, we aren't going to have to go see one unless we ask to go see one. So since then, I ain't been back. So, but all of us handle stuff differently. And I'm standing up here, I'm talking from a personal experience in law enforcement. When it comes to psychology, when it comes to being trained in that type of stuff, I know the least about it as any of y'all in here do, so, or less. But I can speak from my own personal experiences with it. And coming and speaking today, first time I researched suicide amongst law enforcement. I'd always heard about it, but never looked into it, never thought about it on a personal note of doing it. So I've seen people do it, obviously, and understand, I guess, what they were going through to make them want to do it, but never had the thoughts myself. So, I was surprised by some of the stuff that I found out by looking into it, that it was, one of the highest, it's one of the higher risk professions, arguably, that military, as far as people killing themselves. But I understand why after looking into it. And I can talk from the personal aspect of it and what we see in law enforcement, especially on the trooper side of things. And it's very similar to any other agency that works in the field. But, more officers kill themselves every year than are killed in the line of duty. And, you can look at the numbers. You can look at just some of the stuff I got up there. It's constant exposure to negative stuff, basically. Day in and day out, going to violent things or seeing suicide for yourself, job-related stressors. It ain't just what we see every day. It's what we were exposed to as far as or can be exposed to as far as administrative type stuff goes, or just the natures of what you have to do to get the job done. As far as I can speak from our aspect of it, troopers, we work when we're told to work. We work shorthanded all the time. We're used to it. We've never been fully staffed as long as I've been a trooper, and that's going on 12 years, and it hadn't gotten any better. So, when you're the only guy working And as soon as you go in for the night, you're on call until the next morning at daylight, till that daytime guy comes out. That can be a stressor, because you know the phone's going to ring. I mean, all it takes is one idiot, and there's a lot of them. So you're not going to sleep good. You ain't going to sleep good knowing your phone's going to ring and you're going to get called out. And that's what we have to go through. You know, we don't have 24/7 types coverage like a lot of agencies do, municipalities or sheriff's departments. A lot of times there may not be a trooper out in a certain area after midnight. That's just the cold hard facts. So if you're that guy, it's your turn to be on call, then you're going to be covering a county or more when you go in. You're just waiting on the phone to ring. So, and when it rings, you may not be back for a while. And then you may go home, you may sleep for a few hours, and you may be right back up for your shift the next day. It just depends on the schedule. And we don't work set shifts. I mean, we don't work straight 8 A's or straight 10 o'clock in the mornings to 6 at nights or whatever the case may be. We work when we're needed. So you may come out at 6 o'clock one morning, and then the next day you may not come out at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's kind of rough on your family life, social life, things of that nature. So we experience a lot of that stuff. You're exposed to a lot of people with problems, whether it be substance abuse. That's who you're dealing with a lot of times. And people wonder why we're cynical. Well, think about any time we're getting talked to, we're being lied to for the most part. If their mouth's open, they're lying. And that may not be true for everybody that we deal with, but that's the way we got to kind of look at it. So domestic things, you see it day in and day out, problems and problems and problems. Typical day of a law enforcement officer, shift work, different hours. You're trying to balance your home life. You're trying to make your kids' t-ball game, but you're on shift, you can't make it, or things are going on where you can't get to it. You're trying to balance, maybe trying to eat Thanksgiving dinner with your family. You may not get that opportunity to. You're trying to work those type things out. Constant exposure, negativity, confrontation. Dangers of the job, with the new thing that we're exposed to now, is we become targets because of negative media attention. So it's gotten more dangerous for us now to actually be a victim and not be doing them. We pumping gas at a gas station and get shot and killed by some extremist because of crap they see on CNN. So that's become a stressor for our families especially. I don't lose a lot of sleep over it at night, but my wife does. It bothers her. So I just tell her, look at the bright side. If something happens to me, you won't have to work anymore. But y'all going to see some graphic photos right now, okay? If you don't like seeing bad stuff, you don't have to look. You might want to walk out. But this is just becomes the norm for us, okay? You go to these type scenes, then you go home, and you're expected to have a normal life with your family, your friends, or whatever the case may be, and they don't understand your type A personality. They don't understand why you're cynical about things. It's hard to balance it, to be compassionate when you're not at work. These guys can talk about it. It's hard to kind of not be demented, I guess you could say. This is a wreck I worked. Pedestrian got run over and killed. This is a wreck I worked where a teenager wasn't wearing her seatbelt. She just got thrown out of a vehicle and run over on I-65. Just graduated high school. She just would have been wearing her seatbelt. She'd still be with us today. And this is a wreck I worked where a child died in a wreck. It was a double fatality, actually. Him and his little brother got killed because of their actions of a mom. So, just, this is stuff, I'm not a stats person, so most of the time, early 40s is when you're law enforcement folks. That's probably just the wear and tear over the years. It's mostly going to be veterans. Normally, you guys that's been on 1 or 2 years ain't the ones that's committing suicide, but it happens. PTSD has attributed a lot of it. Like I extend, I'm not experienced when it comes to talking about this kind of stuff, but that's just the type of stuff I learned when I was looking at it or looking over it. Why officers commit suicide, some of the same reasons that people do, just normal, but a lot of times we have trouble with relationships, believe that or not. People don't understand this. I mean, when you go into law enforcement, you lose some friends because either they don't want to be around you, or sometimes after a while they're like, this guy's a jackass. So And for most of us, the one reason that it happens, like me, if I'm having issues, I'm probably not going to talk about them like he was talking about. I'm probably not going to call. I'm probably not going to tell my supervisor, I need to go see a shrink. It ain't the manly thing to do. I'm just going to deal with it. I go home and I just deal with it. Now, I've never had those type thoughts, but that's a lot of the issues. You know, we're expected to go work these crashes, work these scenes, whatever the case may be, and then go home and come back out the next day and be ready to do it all over again. That's just what you do. It's like somebody that works at McDonald's. They know how to get a cheeseburger out pretty quick. We know how to work. Troopers know how to work a fatality wreck. We can get one cleaned up in no time. We know how to do it. Okay? We know how to work wrecks. That's what we do. We work wrecks. We deal with people on the road. So, is help available? Yeah, it is if you ask for it. It can be available. Like with us, we have an employee assistance program. The problem is asking for it. But like I say, you see it so much, you do it so. A lot of us it's just what we do. The expectations is there. That's what we signed up to do, you know. So we go, we work them, we go home, come back out the next day, and we do it all over again. So that's from a personal level, speaking on from my end of it. So enjoy it though, you know. It's what I signed up to do, and that's what I'm going to do for 25 years. So every now and then I get some criticism from the wife or whoever about my personality or about the way I look at things, because I don't have a lot of sympathy towards stuff, you know. But there's a reason. It's tough on us to balance that type of stuff. So I appreciate y'all's time.
Good afternoon. My name is Corporal Leonard with the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office. I've been with them now a little over 15 years. I started out on third shift patrol for 6, transferred to first shift for 3, court security for a little while, and now I'm in the position of doing community relations, something that I really like. Before I became a law enforcement officer, I went in a lot of different areas. I graduated college, played football while there, thought I would be a professional athlete, but lost focus. Had a son before I graduated college, had to change my complete mindset. Ended up going in the military as a psychiatric nurse. Came back home because I didn't want to stay in the military, missing the time with my children. Ended up working in the public school system for a little while, and I saw the direction that school system was going, and I said, no, I can't do this. I'll lose my job. So I ended up coming to Montgomery County Sheriff's Office. I love it, and I've been here since 2001. And it's been a great experience. And like everybody's saying, we do a job on a daily basis not knowing what you're going into or what you're going to deal with. Deal with that situation, and then we have to go home to our loved ones without having, for the most part, anyone sit and talk to you to talk about the type of incident that you dealt with. If it was a graphic incident, you may go home and your home life is not situated where your wife or your spouse is, as soon as you walk through the door, they're in on you, cussing, yelling, fussing, or whatever, or y'all having a disagreement for whatever reason, even though you just came from working this ship, doing all these things in the street. That's stress, got you stressed. Then you come home to stress. So like we were talking about, you have to learn how to put everything into perspective and relax yourself, because stress is a real killer. And if we don't take the time to wind down or whatever it is that we like to do to calm down, you can have a heart attack, you can have a stroke, you can get to that point where you feel like you don't have any more control over your life and you want to commit suicide. So being in law enforcement or as a first responder is a big job that you have to deal with. This man right here, when I was working patrol, the state trooper, we worked hand in hand. This man here, a volunteer fireman, we worked hand in hand on a lot of things. going to different calls, because in the county, we work with the volunteer firemen on a regular basis. Like you said, going into the homes, having to find a loved one that's deceased, and you got to, better yet, you got to call or a welfare check. Go down to the residence and you find this loved one deceased. You have to let the people know that, hey, your loved one is found dead. You may have to go in with the funeral home that comes to pick this person up if it was, not foul play involved, and you have to help them pick this person up, put them on a stretcher. And some of the things that I've seen dealing with people that are deceased and helping, that I understand now why they want the families to stay out of the room. It's sometimes you have to do things that is not good for them to see, to even get their loved one on a stretcher, because if they've been there for hours or days, their body is, rigor mortis is setting in, and then you have to do certain things to get them on the stretcher, and you wouldn't want them to see that happen to their loved one. They're already in a stressful situation, something that they didn't foresee coming 9 times out of 10. And so you want to be as polite and, should I say, you want to be courteous to them not to be able to see their loved one in that state at that time. And that plays on our mind as well. The one that really stands out in my mind that really touched me, because you see, like they said, you see a lot of stuff. You see accidents, you see young and old people dying, but the one that really stands out that I can recall more than any incident that I've had to deal with in the last 15 years dealt with a family of 6 that were traveling down in the southern part of Montgomery County on Highway 231 South and near the 82 junction. And it was a traffic accident. When I arrived on the scene, you had 4 individuals that were thrown out of the vehicle. 3 were children, 1 was the father. It was a mother that was in the front seat. She was killed on impact. And while all the volunteer firemen were coming and the other sheriff units were coming to assist me, I had to hold a 3-year-old young lady, a little girl, take her and hold her to the side so that the blood would run out of her mouth and to keep her from choking. And we had to she was air-vac to Birmingham. Her brother, who was thrown out, was air-vac as well. Her oldest brother and her father were taken in an ambulance. The mother, like I said, was killed on impact. And it was a green matter that we saw all around her arm, but no one knew what it was. And I didn't find out until the very next day that she actually had an arm baby in her arms when the truck hit the car and it crushed the baby. And that's all you could see. That was left was the brain matter at that moment. So dealing with children in this capacity in law enforcement, that's the worst thing that we can deal with, especially if we have children of our own. And a lot of times law enforcement will not use the EAP program because of the stigma that's involved in it. They may experience some problems from some of the calls that they've gone to, but because of the stigma, the way that, first of all, the department looks at it, in my opinion, and then the way that people outside of the department actually looks at it when you start going to receive counseling, it keeps a lot of people from going. Because what if you go to this counselor and you're disclosing and you're trying to get where you need to be so that you can do your job on a regular basis to the best of your ability, and then they're writing all this information down and they feel like you may be a harm to yourself. You don't see it, but this is your livelihood. So now if I get committed and have to stay in a facility, 9 times out of 10 I'm going to lose my job. So now I can't take care of my family. That's how some law enforcement officers think. Is it good? Yes. Is it bad? It could possibly be. So even though that program is in place here at Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, I don't know how many guys have used it. We have been blessed to not have any officers killed in the line of duty since I've been there. We've had one shooting between a deputy and a individual that we were transporting, where his holster broke. How? I'm not sure. And he and the inmate were tussling over his weapon, and he was actually shot in his hip. But the guy was apprehended, and he was only hospitalized briefly for that. Stress, as far as in the department, dealing with people that you may not like, they may not like you, but you work together. You may ride in the same vehicle, because some agencies ride two-man units. You may not like your partner for whatever reason. Your partner might have got into it with his spouse before he came to work, but you all still have to come together to work. But that can cause a stressful situation, depending on how you all are able to talk about it and handle what's going on. You may have a supervisor that's riding you for whatever reason. You could be slacking in your job because of not having your home life together, and you coming to work late. Your uniform is wrinkled. You're misspelling too many words in your report, and they having to kick it back to you in order for you to make the corrections that needed to be made. That causes stress for that officer at that time. Does he have the coping skills that he needs to relax and get where he needs to be to do his job on a regular basis? We're not sure. As he was saying in his presentation, a lot of law enforcement officers take their own lives for the same reason that regular people take their own lives. The statistics show that from 2012 to 2015, the number of law enforcement officers committing suicide has decreased. It's a total of 19%, where they're showing in 2015 it was only 102 officers that nationwide that committed suicide. That's still a lot of people that possibly someone could have said something or done something to keep them from wanting to take their lives. Knowing how to relieve your stress is one of the biggest things that we can do. When we went to the police academy, they always taught us to leave work at work. But a lot of times you can't leave work at work when you're on call. For the most part, when you're in law enforcement, you working 24/7. It just depends on what's going on around you. If you're in the store and a crime is being committed, you're a law enforcement officer. You may have your family with you. You got to do your job. Some people may choose not to do that, but by law and by the oath that you've taken, it's your job. So you don't have that downtime. Me personally, I think I had so much going on when I became an officer that I had so many things to help me to relieve my stress that I don't really think it bothered me at that point. I was a father. I was working as a deputy. I was a father. I was married. I was coaching football. I was going to school. So I was doing a lot of things after work that were positive, that shared positive things into my life that really kept me from being down in the dumps where I could have been. Because at one point, working at here at the sheriff's office, they started calling me the 1089 man. In our 10 codes, 1089 means you found someone dead. So at one point, I was getting so many calls and finding so many people that were deceased, they started joking about it at work. But if I didn't have the capability to release all of that and not hold it in, it could have put me in a state of depression possibly, because I'm constantly finding people dead on a regular basis. So that's something that a lot of people have to look at as well. When we're going through that, we need understanding at home as well. We need understanding from the people that we work with. But we have to be able to articulate that sometimes, because a lot of times people don't notice that today you're down. You're not talking about football like you normally do, like he was saying earlier. But it is a big part of our job. We take that oath to run to the danger, to protect and serve, to do our job to the best of our ability. But when we do our job and we're involved in an officer-involved shooting, or we arrive on the scene where we've had a 1050 or an accident and someone's dead, and we have to get them out the car and deal with the gruesome part, or we find this person that was missing in the river, and when we find them, their body is swollen, the smell is very bad, and you can't get it out your head, and you're having nightmares about it. We have to know how to deal with that stress and get it out of our head. Relax. Do something that makes you feel good to keep you from thinking about it. And right now, my biggest thing that I do, archery. I love to shoot my bow. I'm getting ready for bow hunting as we speak. I missed going last year because I worked so much, but this year I plan on going. Little things like that, spending time with the children, you got to do that. It helps to keep your mind occupied with something that's positive. And time is one thing that you can't get back. You can't keep putting this off, say I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do it the next day or whatever. Time doesn't wait for anyone. 15 years has gone by so fast for me being in law enforcement. It just seems like yesterday. The day before I graduated, it was 9/11. When we were getting ready we were doing graduation practice, and they stopped practice, and we all were glued to the TV. That was a big stress right there before we even started doing our job. We felt like it was an attack on the United States. We didn't know if it was against just that area. We didn't know if law enforcement was going to start being attacked. We didn't know if the military was going to have to go and fight. We didn't know anything at that moment. So the day before I graduated, we were in a stressful situation, and we hadn't even become law enforcement officers. So, but it is a great job. I enjoy doing it. Never thought I would be a law officer, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. And thank you all for listening and inviting me out.
Let's give them all a round of applause.